The basket of towels was warm against my hip, still smelled like lavender and sunlight. I wasn't doing anything special, just walking back from the laundry room, humming a little without thinking. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the television somewhere behind a closed door. Then I heard it, his voice. "Dead weight," he said. My feet stopped. The towels shifted slightly in my arms, but I didn't move. He wasn't whispering. No hush, no caution, just saying it. Like it wasn't a secret, something inside me pulled tight, not like a string snapping, but like one being cinched too close to the bone. I didn't lean in. I didn't want to hear more. It was enough. The sting wasn't in the words, not really. It was how easy they came out of him, how freely he let them into the air we shared. I stood there a few seconds longer, listening to nothing but the rustle of the curtains at the end of the hall. The warmth from the towels began to cool, but my cheeks flushed hot, and still I didn't move. Not yet. The door was halfway open, just enough to show he didn't care if I heard. I looked at the edge of it, wood chipped near the handle, paint wearing off from all the years I'd wiped it clean. He didn't even bother closing it. It wasn't the insult that cut the deepest. It was that there was no effort to hide it. I stood there, clutching warm towels that now felt like bricks. His voice faded into another sentence I didn't catch. But it didn't matter. The first one had already done its job. For a second, I just stared at the gap in the door like it was a canyon. Something had split, and I wasn't sure it would. Close again. I inhaled once, held it, then turned back toward the hallway. I took one step, then another, slow and steady, like I was walking through thick air. The hallway had never felt this long. My heels tapped against the wood floor, but the sound was faint, muffled under the weight I felt pressing down from my chest to my knees. Not grief, not quite sadness, just clarity. The kind that doesn't knock you over. It just settles, like dust you didn't know was floating until it lands on everything. Past the framed photo of us from years ago, him in overalls, a gap-toothed grin. I used to stop and smile at it. Today I didn't. The sunlight spilled onto the quilt on my bed as I stepped into my room. A soft breeze from the fan brushed against my neck. I sat down on the edge of the bed and rested the basket on the floor. The warmth of the towels had faded, but the heaviness in my chest hadn't. My hand reached for the drawer like it had 100 times. The third one down. Always the third. It creaked slightly when I opened it. Same sound every time. There were birth certificates yellowing around the edges. A few recipes I'd copied by hand decades ago, still smudged with flower fingerprints. Then the drawing. He made it in first grade. Me with a big smile and spiky hair. He'd written, "My mom is the best," in crooked letters that slanted off the page. I traced the corner of it with my thumb, and beneath it, the envelope. The deed. My name. Still there. Clear. Bold. Seeing it didn't make me feel victorious. Just grounded. Like something inside me had stopped spinning. I held the paper in both hands, my fingers curling softly around the edges, like holding something sacred. I sat back on the bed, the document resting in my lap. The hallway was quiet now, the door still ajar. I looked toward it, not expecting him to walk in, but as if it might somehow offer an answer. It didn't. The room was dim now, the corners filling with the blue-gray of early evening. The hum of the fan brushed across my arm like a sigh, and I thought of every time I'd kissed a skinned knee, every peanut butter sandwich I made, every late-night fever I sat through while he slept. I thought of the field trips I chaperoned, the clothes I mended, the dreams I whispered into his tired head. And now? Dead weight. That's what I was. I looked down at the paper again, and for the first time in a long time, I let the truth settle. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I folded the deed back into the envelope, clean, slow creases, like I was tucking. In a child for bed. Then I placed it gently on the nightstand, not to hide it, to remind myself it was there. I sat a moment longer. The house had gone still, as if it knew not to intrude. No anger rose. No tears. Just a quiet knowing. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the woman I used to be. The one who saved, who planned, who prepared. She deserved to be remembered. I clicked on the lamp. A soft glow filled the room, warming the edges of the silence, and in that light I made my decision. For me, finally. The knock was soft, barely there. Not the kind that demanded anything, but the kind that asked gently, like it didn't want to interrupt. I looked up from my sewing machine, the thread still trailing through my fingers. There he stood in the doorway, 10 years old, holding something, close to his chest. "Come in, baby," I said, already knowing something had cracked. He stepped inside without saying a word, and as the sunset painted stripes across the floor, I saw what he held, his trophy, or what was left of it, the gold figure. At the top had snapped off, leaving behind jagged edges and a little boy who didn't know how to fix it. He didn't cry, not yet. But his eyes looked too big for his face, and he bit his lip like holding in tears made him stronger. That moment, his hands, that knock, the broken thing he held, it stayed with me. Still does. The base was still in his hand when he sat down. On the small stool across from me, he looked down at it like it was his fault the thing broke. "It was my fault," he whispered. I didn't rush to answer. I just wiped my hands on my apron, brushing off a few cookie crumbs from earlier. "Things break," I said gently, kneeling beside him. "That doesn't mean they're ruined." He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe that. His cheeks were damp now, just 2 shiny lines running down, picking up the gold flecks from the broken figure. I reached out and took the pieces from him, carefully, like they were made of something sacred. His breath hitched a little, like it didn't know whether to stay in or leave. I didn't ask how it happened, didn't scold. I just reached for the small box I kept under the sewing table. Glue, a few clamps, ribbon. But more than that, I gave him quiet. I let him sit with me, not as a problem to solve, but as a boy who needed a safe place to land. That night, I didn't. Just fix plastic. I hope, I patched something inside him too. I worked slowly, setting the base upright and easing the figure back into place. The glue was stubborn, but I was patient. I used a bit of ribbon to hold it steady, blue and fraying at the edges, but strong where it counted. He didn't speak, just watched me, elbows on the table, chin in his palms. Outside, I could hear kids laughing, chasing each other down the street. For once, he didn't ask to join them. He just stayed with me. There was something in his eyes that night. Not shame, not pride, just trust. Like he was handing me more than a trophy to fix. When I finally handed it back to him, he didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. He looked at it, then at me, and in that soft golden light, I saw a little bit of who I hoped to be. And maybe who he was learning to become. Years later, a letter came. It was plain, no stamp, just slid under the door like it didn't want to be seen. A collector, threatening repossession. His name was on it, not mine. I read it twice. Then a third time, and I didn't hesitate. I paid it that same day, quietly. From the same account I used to buy school shoes and birthday gifts. I didn't tell him. I didn't need to. It wasn't about bailing him out. It was about protecting something he hadn't even realized was breaking. That's what you do when you love someone. You don't wait for them to ask. You remember the night they handed you broken things, and you say, "I've done this before. I can do it again." No glory, no applause. Just me, the kitchen table, a cooling cup of tea, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be seen to be real. The deed stayed in the same place all those years, bottom drawer, beneath the quilt patterns, and holiday napkins. He never asked about it. I never told him, not out of pride, not even to hold it over him. I think I was waiting for him to grow into the kind of man who'd understand that some gifts come in silence, that some protection doesn't come with a label or a lesson. But as time went on, I began to wonder if my silence became a wall, if what I thought was love looked too much like distance. Now I catch myself staring at that drawer more often, wondering what he'd say if he opened it, if he saw my name, still there, still holding the walls together, if he'd realize I never stopped holding them for him. The trophy's still in the garage. It sits on a shelf next to old paint cans and a box of tangled holiday lights. Dust covers the gold figure now, but I remember the night he held it, cradled it like something alive. I remember how careful he was, even in his hurt. And sometimes, I think maybe I should have reminded him of that night, told him, "You handed me something broken, and I never threw it away." Maybe then he'd understand that I wasn't trying to take anything. I was trying to protect what we built. I was trying to keep something whole. His fork hit the plate with a clatter, sharp, sudden. Too loud for such a small movement, it echoed through the room like a warning. I flinched just slightly, though I pretended I didn't. We were sitting in that awkward kind of quiet, when smiles are stretched too thin and the clink of cutlery sounds like thunder. The pot roast was tender. The green beans were just how he liked them, still with a snap. But no one tasted any of it. I asked a simple question. "How's everything going with the credit cards?" That was all. His fork dropped like the words offended him. He didn't answer, just stared at the plate, jaw clenched. The clock on the wall ticked behind us, steady and loud. Tick, tick, tick. I felt it then, the shift, like something inside him pulled away, like a wall being slowly raised between us. I reached for my glass, just to do something with my hands. My fingers felt cold, and somewhere deep inside, under all the years of knowing better, my chest ached, the kind of ache only a mother understands. I still don't know if she meant to do it, but the glass tilted, slow and deliberate, or maybe clumsy. Either way, the red wine spilled in a thin stream across the white tablecloth. It spread like a warning. He didn't react, didn't blink, just kept staring at his plate. Her hand twitched as she set the glass back down, but her face didn't change. Reached for a napkin, slow, calm, pretending to care about the stain. But what I really wanted was to do something with the silence. I started, gently blotting at the red mess. No one said anything. Funny how silence can feel louder than yelling. I knew what the spill meant. It wasn't about the wine. It was a message, a line being drawn. Without anyone needing to say the words, "You're not part of this. You don't belong here." I kept dabbing at the table, pretending I didn't feel it all. But I did. "Stay out of it," he said. Not loud, not angry. Just cold, like he was reading, off a rule he'd already written. I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. The words sat in the air like smoke. Not harsh, not cruel. Just final, like a door closing quietly behind you. I pushed my peas around my plate. I thought about the first time I taught him to tie his shoes, how many tries it took, how proud he was when he finally got it. And now he was untying me, quietly, like I'd become a thread that no longer served the stitching. My stomach turned, not from the food, from the unraveling. She didn't even look up. Not when the fork fell. Not when the wine spilled. Not even when he said it. She just kept slicing her meat, each movement slow and exact, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been dismissed. I reached to blot the wine again, and she didn't even pause. Not a glance. Not a breath. I looked at her face for something. Shock, guilt, anything human. But There was nothing there, just focus, just silence, and I sat there thinking, this is the house I helped them buy. The down payment, the new fridge, the paint on the walls, and here I was, invisible, erased in the very space I helped create. After dinner, I stood to clear the table. It gave me something to do, something besides feeling. As I walked toward the sink, I noticed it, just the corner of a paper peeking out from behind the microwave. I wasn't snooping. I was breathing. I reached for it, pulled it free. It was a bill, then another, credit cards, unpaid, final notices, every single one in his name. Red ink. Bold letters. I held them in my hands and stared for a long time. No one had told me. They never said a word, but the paper didn't lie. It was all there. Everything he wouldn't say, everything she tried to hide with that silent knife and fork. The truth had waited for me. Behind a microwave. The sink water ran warm over my hands. I scrubbed the plate gently, the way I always did. One side, then the other. But my mind wasn't on the dishes. It was on the boy who once brought me broken toys and bruised pride, and the man who sat across from me tonight, quiet, hard, closed. The suds swirled down the drain. The sponge squeaked. The rosemary scent of the dish soap filled the air, soft and sharp all at once. I looked out the window, evening closing in like a slow tide, and I thought, how many times had the signs whispered, how many warnings had I washed away? The clink of the plates in the drying rack sounded too clean for what had just happened, too clean for what was really breaking. The key felt cold in my hand, colder than it should have been for a sunny Sunday. I'd just come from church, the last hymn still echoing faintly in my ears. My shoes clicked once against the porch as I stepped up and slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, slower this time. Maybe I'd angled it wrong. Maybe the lock was sticking. It had done that before, years ago in winter when the moisture swelled the wood. But this wasn't winter, and this wasn't the same door. Not anymore. I wiggled the key, gently, then with more pressure. It wouldn't budge. That's when I felt it. Not confusion. Not yet. Just unfamiliarity. The rustle of dry leaves on the porch brushed against my ankles. The trees whispered something I didn't want to hear. I pulled the key out and stared at it like it might explain itself. Same shape. Same weight. Same little scratch on the top edge from the time I dropped it in the driveway. But it didn't belong anymore, and suddenly, neither did I. The door hadn't changed. The welcome had. I stood there in my Sunday best, the Bible still in my hands, warm from where it had rested on my lap during service. Not because I needed it for prayer at that moment, but because I needed something familiar to hold. The silence from inside pressed harder than the wind that whipped across the porch. I knocked. Once, waited, knocked again. Still nothing. The paint on the front door was starting to peel around the edges, and I stared at it like maybe the cracks would speak. I shifted my weight, the wood creaking beneath my heels. I could hear a faint bark in the distance, a neighbor's dog breaking the stillness. The scent of chimney smoke drifted from somewhere. Down the street, someone else's home still lit from within. But here, where I had folded laundry, cooked meals, soothed fevers, nothing. Just the echo of my own hand against the wood. I looked down at my Bible. It didn't open any doors. The curtain moved, just a twitch, like it had caught a breeze. But then I saw her. She didn't hide. She didn't speak. She just looked at me and smiled. That kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, doesn't even try to, and then she let the curtain fall. It was worse than a slammed door. I stood still. Not angry, not shocked, just still, like my bones had settled into something too heavy to carry. I had known there was distance between us, I just didn't know how proud she was to make it permanent. The porch light wasn't on, though the day was already slipping away. The shadows on the blinds stretched across the siding. The wind picked up again. But I didn't flinch. There are certain kinds of storms that don't make noise at first. You just feel them in your chest, and that's exactly where this one started. She slid the brochure across the table like it was a plate of toast. Golden. Pines has lovely walking trails, she said, her voice bright, but her eyes steady and cold. I didn't touch it. The glossy paper caught the light, mountains, smiles, benches under trees. I reached for my coffee instead. It was too sweet. She always added too much sugar. Looks peaceful, I said. She smiled again. You'll be more comfortable there. I nodded, slowly, pretending to consider it. But inside, I already knew. Golden Pines had denied her application weeks ago. Credit check didn't pass. I had seen the letter. She didn't know I'd read it. And so I sat there, letting her rehearse the next line in her plan like I hadn't just watched the whole thing unravel, thread by thread. The toast on my plate was burnt, but I ate it anyway. Didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. I walked slowly to the bedroom, my hands calm, my breath even. The drawer was stiff at first, hadn't been opened in years. But it gave way with a familiar creak, and there it was, the deed, still tucked between my wedding certificate and the baby bracelet they clipped around his wrist in the hospital. My name, clear, steady, legal. No one else's. Not hers. I ran my fingers across the paper like I was smoothing out truth. It's funny. People think the end of a thing erases the beginning. They forget the roots when they start building the walls. But I remembered. I had never forgotten. That night, I lit a candle on the nightstand and opened the window just enough to let the wind come in. The sheets were cool against my legs, and the hum of the ceiling fan clicked steady overhead. I held the Bible in my lap, not for strength, but for steadiness, and I prayed, not to be welcomed back, not for an apology, but for patience, for clarity, for the strength to let it fall apart without me rushing to hold it up again. I thanked God for paperwork, for dates, for signatures, for the kind of preparation that takes quiet years to build. I turned out the light and pulled the blanket higher over my chest. I didn't need to fight. I just had to wait. The truth had already been written. The mailbox creaked when I opened it, same as always. That sound hadn't changed in years. No warning, no drama, just the usual groan of metal that had stood through summers and snow. I reached in without thinking. I wasn't expecting anything. Not a letter. Not a moment. It was just habit, like brushing my hair before bed or double-checking. The lock before sleep. My fingers closed around a stack of envelopes, rubber-banded and thin. I pulled them out and flipped through quickly. Coupons, a political flyer, one large envelope, no return address. The sun was warm on my shoulder, and the scent of laundry from next door drifted through the breeze. Somewhere, a lawnmower buzzed. Steadily, like the day was just doing its job. I turned the envelope over in my hands once, twice. It wasn't mine, but the address was, and I had a feeling this one wasn't just a mistake. I stood by the fence, letting the wind tug gently at my skirt hem while I tore the top of the envelope with one finger. It opened without a fight. Inside was a statement, white paper, black ink, numbers that spoke louder than words. I read the amount once, then again, and I felt my knees shift, just slightly. It was past overdue. It was desperate. It was the kind of number that doesn't whisper warning. It screams. I glanced back, at the house. The windows looked the same, curtains drawn. Nothing unusual, but this paper told a different story. I looked back down, and the figures stared up at me. I wasn't swimming in it, but someone was, and I wasn't sure they knew how to float. The breeze picked up, rustling dry maple leaves along the curb. Still, I stood there, holding a truth I hadn't asked for, but couldn't put back. Something slipped out when I unfolded the paper further, a small yellow square. I caught it before the wind could, one single post-it. I knew that handwriting instantly, curvy, neat, calculated. I'd seen it on grocery lists, school permission slips, the sticky notes on the fridge that said, "Don't forget to defrost the chicken." But this one said, "We need her gone before November." That was it. No name, no punctuation, just her, like I was a deadline, a bill to be paid, a task to be cleared. I looked up, a crow cawed once from the wire above, loud in the quiet. My fingers tightened around the note. The scent of ink and envelope glue still clung to my hands. The maple tree cast a long shadow across the driveway, reaching toward my feet. That note didn't just fall, it struck, and I stood there, not sure what was worse. What it said, or how unsurprised I felt reading it. I didn't rush back inside, didn't slam the door, didn't tear the paper to shreds, though part of me wanted to. I walked to the kitchen, the floor tiles cool under my soles. The light through the window shifted. Across the counter, golden but tired. I set the envelope down like it was something delicate. My hands moved slow. I folded the post-it first, edge to edge, like I used to fold his school notes before tucking them into the scrapbook. Then the letter. Then the envelope. I didn't need to look again. I'd already memorized it. I wasn't calm. I was something deeper than calm. I was settled, and when storms come, I've learned, not everything needs thunder. Sometimes the quiet is enough to shake the walls. I went straight to the bedroom, not to cry, not to nap, to begin. The old suitcase was still on the top shelf of the closet, tucked behind sweaters I hadn't worn in years. I pulled it down. It landed on the bed with a thud. I opened drawers, not for clothes, for paper, receipts, medical records, the deed, birth certificates, everything with my name on it, every line that proved I had been more than a footnote. I placed them inside, one by one, not rushing, not angry, focused. They thought they were pushing me out. They had no idea I was the one preparing, not to leave, but to stand, to stay, to own what was already mine. The room smelled like cedar and old paper, like something strong and honest. I zipped the suitcase, and just like that, I was ready, not to go, but to remind them what belongs to me, stays with me, the elm trees still whispered. That soft, rustling sound. That was always mine. Like voices I once knew, still tucked up in the branches. I walked slow, not from age, but from memory. Every step I took pressed into the cracked sidewalk, like it was greeting me. I remembered the wobble of stroller wheels bumping along these very cracks, the way I used to swerve around that one lifted edge near the gutter. Now it was just me. No little hands pulling at my skirt. No juice boxes or napkins stuffed in my purse, just my footsteps, one after the other, and the smell of sun-warmed pavement and somebody's fresh-cut grass up the street. The sky above was a clean, cloudless blue, just like it used to be when the world felt wide and full, and somehow the breeze through the trees made me feel seen, like this street hadn't forgotten me, even if everyone else had. The corner store looked the same from the outside, same peeling trim, same leaning sign. But the bell over the door had changed. It used to jingle, soft, warm. Now it rang out sharp, tinny, too high. It made me blink. Inside, the shelves were neater, brighter. Gone was the smell of tobacco and worn-out wood. Now it smelled like lemon cleaner and sugar dust. A young woman stood behind the counter. She smiled, polite but not familiar. "Good afternoon," she said. "Afternoon," I nodded, walking straight to the candy jars. I reached in and pulled out a single peppermint. Same as I used to do, back when money was tight and sweetness had to be small. I paid in coins. She placed the change in my hand gently. "Have a nice day," she said. I smiled, stepping back into the light. It wasn't mine anymore. But I had stood inside it once. That was enough. I kept walking. Children laughed. On the next block, someone had set up a sprinkler on the lawn and bare feet darted through it. That used to be mine, those summers. Those sidewalk puddles. Their laughter was higher, freer somehow, their clothes cleaner. My feet still knew every crack, every uneven curb, every porch stoop where we once sat eating watermelon. I passed a house with a tricycle on the steps, another, with chalk drawings smeared into pastel smudges. I smiled at a woman sweeping her porch. She didn't smile back. Just looked at me and went back to her sweeping. I kept moving. This wasn't my street anymore. But my footsteps remembered. Even if no one else did. I stopped when I reached the corner. The bank. Still there, same brick building. Same wide windows. It looked smaller now. But that day, years ago, it had felt enormous. I'd walked in holding a manila folder, wearing lipstick too bright for daytime and heels I couldn't afford. But I stood tall. I'd asked for a loan to open my shop. No husband, no co-signer. Just me. They said yes. That was the first time anyone in a suit said yes to me without needing a man beside me. I'd walked out holding more than a check. I held pride. I stared at the door now. I didn't want to go in. I didn't need to. But I stood there a while, watching my reflection in the glass, and somehow I looked taller again. As I turned to leave, something tugged at me. Not sadness, not nostalgia. Strength. Quiet. Deep strength, the kind that had carried babies on hips, balanced bills, stitched hems by hand. I'd done all of it, made a life from coupons and casseroles. Not with help. Not with handouts. With grit. People forget what women carry, what we build with so little. Maybe my back bends now when I walk too long. Maybe my fingers ache when I button things. But the fire? Still there, just burns slower, steadier. I looked up at the elm branches stretching overhead. The wind caught a plastic bag and sent it rolling down the sidewalk like it had somewhere to be. I watched it, then stepped forward into its path. The sun was warm across my shoulders, and I walked on, not to chase the past, but to remind myself, she's still here, still walking. I laid the Queen of Hearts down like I always did, slow, gentle, as if I had all the time in the world and no worries. In the room, my smile said nothing. That's how I wanted it. The bridge club was my one weekly ritual. 4 women, 2 decks, and an understanding that life stayed at the door. It was soft in there, safe. The air smelled like Betty's lemon bars cooling on parchment, and the overhead fan ticked just loud enough to remind us we were real. I picked up my next card and looked at it without really seeing it. Then I said, casual as a napkin fold, "Funny how fast a house can turn heavy when debt starts piling up." There was a pause. A shuffle. "Oh?" someone said. I didn't elaborate. Just shrugged and added, "I think they're in over their heads, but that's none of my business." And I meant it to sound like that. Loose, unimportant, but it wasn't. I wasn't fishing. I was planting. And Betty caught it. Her eyes twitched just slightly. Her lips pulled tight like she'd just sipped something too cold. The hand went on. But the game had already shifted. Betty paused mid-bite. Her lemon bar hung in the air for half a second, then she set it gently down on the plate, powdered sugar sticking to her fingertips. Her eyebrows did a little dance, just enough to show she'd taken the bait. "You know," she said slowly, wiping her fingers on a napkin, "my brother handles foreclosures." She said it soft, like a secret. I kept stirring my tea, round and round, even though it had long gone cold. I smiled. Small. Oh, really? I said. That's a tricky business these days. She nodded once, watching me closely. The spoon clinked against the cup, too loud in a room full of quiet. Sometimes, answers don't fall from the sky. They come wrapped in powdered sugar and spoken between women who know exactly what not to say too quickly. 2 days later, the phone rang just past 6. That quiet hour when the sky goes gold and the house holds its breath between day and night. I was folding a dish towel when it rang. Hello? I answered, not expecting much. Ma'am? His voice was low. Professional. This is Alan Corbett. I believe you spoke to my sister, Betty? Yes, I said slowly, setting the towel down. Well, she passed along some details. I took a look. There was a pause. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. You've still got power, he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a reminder. His voice was calm, but his words reached deeper than I expected. Not relief, not anger, just readiness. Like something inside me stood up without moving. I understand, I said. Good, he replied. If you ever need to talk options, I'm happy to advise, strictly confidential. Thank you. We hung up, and I stood in the amber light for a while, the dish towel still folded, my breath slow and even. He said it like it should have been obvious. You've still got power, you just don't know it yet. That's what echoed through me later, as I sat in bed with papers spread across the quilt, not their papers. Mine, documents with my name, receipts, certificates, pages I'd saved when everyone said they weren't worth keeping. The window was cracked, letting in the dusk air, and my bedside lamp cast a soft pool of yellow around me. I looked down at my hands, still steady. I wasn't just a guest in that house. I wasn't just someone's mother. I was the name on the deed, the history in the walls, and... The longer I stared at those pages, the more I realized I didn't lose anything. They just forgot who they were dealing with. The drawer stuck a little at first. It always did. I leaned in, gave it the right nudge, and it popped open with a sigh. Inside was the file. Edges soft from years of handling. Label still sharp, Plan B. I'd written that with a red pen the year after Harold died. Back then, I believed in backup plans more than I believed in promises. I pulled it out, set it on the desk. Inside, receipts, legal documents. The original loan letter. The deed, a letter I'd written to myself on my 50th birthday. I flipped through it all slowly, not rushing. Not reliving, just remembering. My history sat there, quiet and unshaken. Not dusty, just waiting. The room smelled like dry paper and old envelopes. Outside, night was blooming, soft and dark. Inside, I was wide awake and ready. The next time I saw Betty, I smiled, not wide, just enough. She raised her chin a little, as if to say, I see you. We played our hands. Bridge teaches you to watch people, to wait, to know the value of every card, and more importantly, the patience to play it right. That night, I realized I wasn't clinging to scraps. I was holding the whole table, and I was finally ready to shuffle the deck. The phone buzzed once, just once. I looked at the screen, already knowing it wasn't a person. Reminder, time to refill your prescription. I stared at it like it might change. Like it might blink and turn into a message from him. A call from the kids. A voicemail even. But it stayed the same. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the soft stretch of evening slipping into night. Shadows reached across the tile. The refrigerator hummed its low, steady sound. No music, no laughter, no knock on the door. I set the phone back down, face down this time. The silence wasn't heavy, just quiet, too quiet for a birthday. I stood by the counter a moment longer, one hand resting. on the edge. Not sorrow, not exactly. Just that feeling of standing in a doorway no one walks through anymore. Still, waiting for footsteps I stopped expecting years ago. I cracked the eggs slowly, one by one, into the bowl. The shells made a soft, brittle sound against the glass. The scent of lemon zest lifted into the air, warm and bright. It was the same recipe I'd used every year. 3 eggs, butter soft, not melted. Sugar stirred in slow. I didn't hum. I didn't need to. The oven did the work, its hum low and steady as it warmed the room. I poured the batter into the round pan, scraping the sides with the flat of the saw. Wooden spoon. It was familiar, this rhythm, this making. I hadn't planned on it, but my hands had already started before my heart caught up. The glow from the stovetop light haloed the mixing bowl. I watched it rise through the oven window, golden and even. The scent of vanilla and lemon sugar filled the room like memory. I didn't light candles for attention. I didn't frost it for guests. I did it for me, for the peace of doing something sweet on a day that didn't offer much. I spread the frosting with the back of a spoon. Soft strokes. Slow. No rush. No roses. No letters piped in shaky script. Just white frosting over yellow cake, like snow covering sunlight. I placed a single candle in the center. Not for celebration. Just for habit. It flickered, the flame small but steady. No singing. No clapping. I sat down at the table and watched the candle for a while. It didn't dance, just swayed gently, like it knew no one else was coming. The window behind me showed the dark outside, quiet, complete. The silence was so still, I could hear the faint crackle of the wick. And it almost felt like someone breathing beside me. The file folder sat next to my plate. I pulled it closer between bites. The cake was still warm, comfort on a fork. I sipped from a chipped mug. The documents slid out like they'd been waiting. My name, their names, dates, numbers, signatures, truths typed in black and white. I didn't rush, didn't shuffle, just laid them out across the table like puzzle pieces. The candle cast soft shadows on the edges of the pages. Marriage license, medical records, bank statements. The deed. It wasn't revenge that sat with me. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. That folder didn't judge. It just remembered. And tonight, on the quietest birthday I could remember, I finally saw the full picture. No more hoping they'd change. No more waiting for calls. Just the truth, and the choice to do something with it. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. The deed was already in place, just needed the new line, the new address. I wrote it slowly, carefully, each letter firm, like I was carving something into stone. The candlelight flickered near my knuckles. I finished the last stroke, then set the pen down, and I whispered the address out loud. Not for drama. Not for anyone to hear. Just for me. Like saying a prayer to the air, a wish no one granted, so I granted it myself. The flame dipped once, then rose again. I leaned forward, breathed in, then blew it out. The smoke curled up like a ribbon, soft and gray. And in the hush that followed, I didn't feel sadness. I felt certainty. I had finally given myself something they never remembered to. A beginning. His knock wasn't soft. It rattled the door, sharp, impatient, not a visit, a demand. I took a sip of my coffee, let the warmth settle on my tongue. I didn't rush to the door. Morning light poured through the sheer curtains. The condo was still cool from the night. Hummingbirds buzzed outside, dipping into the feeder like they always did. The knock came again, louder. I set my cup down, adjusted my cardigan, and walked to the door with slow steps. When I opened it, there he was. Red-faced, breath short, his dress shirt stuck to his back with sweat. He looked like someone who ran through consequences too late. "Where is it?" he snapped. No greeting, no hello. I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. He didn't come to talk. He came for control. And he was about to learn he didn't have it anymore. I didn't flinch. I just turned back toward the living room and reached for the manila envelope resting on the coffee table. It had been ready for days. I picked it up with one hand, felt lighter than it should have, given what it carried. I turned and held it out to him. He stared at it like it might be a trick. His eyes narrowed. I didn't say a word. The wall clock ticked softly behind me. I heard the spoon in my half-empty mug settle back against the ceramic. The envelope sat quietly between us, and then he took it, with a hand that didn't quite stop shaking. He opened it with fingers that weren't used to doing the hard work. The seal tore slower than he meant it to. His eyes scanned quickly at first, searching for something, then slower, then stopped. There was no deed, no claim to the house, no last chance tucked in the folds. Only the mortgage bill, his name, his responsibility. No signatures but his own. He looked up, but didn't say anything. The light caught the edge of a picture frame behind him, one of those old ones, when he still had both arms wrapped around me like I was the center of his world. Now, the only thing wrapping him was silence and his own paper trail. He let out a laugh, short, dry, and sharp. "You're joking," he said, but he didn't meet my eyes. His voice cracked just enough to make the room feel louder. I didn't smile, didn't nod, I just looked at him. And I knew he saw it, every birthday missed, every unanswered message, every time he needed me only when it served him. He looked down again. The air between us held tight like a pulled thread. The breeze slipped in through the open window, curling against the scent of vanilla from my candle. He smelled like panic. I smelled like peace. And neither of us had to say what we were both thinking, because the truth was already sitting in his hands. I took a slow breath and sat down in my kitchen chair. He stayed standing, his shadow stretched across the floor, long and unsure. He looked smaller than he had at the door. "I'm not joking," I said softly. He didn't respond. I folded my hands in my lap. "You shifted the weight." "To me for years," I said, eyes steady. "Loans, favors, silence. You gave me everything but room to stand." Still no answer. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just finishing a sentence he started a long time ago. "No, dear," I said finally, just balancing the scales. The kitchen clock ticked again. His eyes flicked toward the envelope, back to me. And for once, he didn't have a line ready. He didn't slam the door when he left, just opened it slow and walked out like he wasn't quite sure what just happened. He moved slower than he came in, like the weight of the envelope under his arm had finally settled in. I watched from the window. Outside, the hummingbirds zipped past the feeder, darting between the flower pots. Their wings buzzed like applause. I poured myself another cup of coffee. It tasted warmer this time. Maybe because I finally wasn't holding it with one hand braced for another. Knock. He left with the truth, and I stayed with my peace. It's nothing fancy. Just a soft blue recliner that hugs my back in all the right places. The arms are wide enough for a book and a cup of tea. The fabric is worn, but not tired. When I sit in it, I feel held. No creaking ceiling above me, no stomping overhead. Just hush, the kind of hush that settles in when the work is done and the world has nothing left to demand from you. The linen curtains sway in the breeze. The lamplight beside me glows just warm enough to color the pages of the book I haven't opened yet. There's a faint scent in the air, chamomile and cotton, maybe from the candle, maybe just the room learning how to exhale. Funny, I never thought furniture could feel like forgiveness, but here I am, held, not hurried, and I think that matters more than anyone ever told me it would. There's a silence here. I didn't know I was missing. Not the kind that leaves you lonely. The kind that lets you breathe. No footsteps above. No whispers through paper-thin walls. Just the soft thump of my own slippers across clean floors. The gentle clink of a spoon against porcelain as I stir my tea. I used to dread silence. Now, I let it wrap around me like a sweater I didn't know I owned. The sky outside is blushing peach, evening sliding in with grace instead of grief. Through the window, I can smell something sweet from the neighbor's garden, roses or maybe honeysuckle. The way. Trees rustle just enough to remind me that life is still moving, even if I'm sitting still. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for something to happen. I feel like I've arrived. I don't hold their debts anymore, or their coldness, or their moods, shifting like clouds that never cleared. What I hold now is my coffee, warm between both. Palms. I hold my stories, the ones they never asked to hear. I hold the deed, with my name, and only mine. There was a time when I thought love meant carrying everyone else's weight, their disappointments, their silence, their mess, and I carried it without complaint, thinking if I just bent a little more, maybe they'd meet me halfway, but they never did. And bending for too long, well, it breaks things. So I stopped. And the strange thing is, when I put their weight down, I didn't fall. I rose. Lighter, quieter. More me. There's cinnamon in the air, something warming in the kitchen I made for one. The piano music coming through. The neighbor's window drifts in like a memory I don't need to chase. And here in this amber light, I finally feel full, but only with what belongs to me. When people ask how I did it, how I walked away, how I started over, I don't give them the whole story. Not the chapters filled with slammed doors and silence. Not the sleepless nights staring at ceilings that didn't belong to me. Just smile. The kind of smile that tucks pain behind laugh lines. The kind that says, I survived, without needing applause. Some stories aren't owed to the world. Some stories get told in the way you carry your shoulders a little higher. In the peace that lingers on your face when no one's watching. In the choice to make tea instead of excuses. The sun is slipping low now, and the curtains glow golden pink around the edges. The wind chimes out front whisper just enough to remind me. Still, here. Still standing. Sometimes a smile is the full story. The day I walked in, I didn't bring bitterness. I brought boxes, soft blankets that smelled like home. Old letters I couldn't throw away, even when the people behind them did, I didn't bring. Blame, just truth. I set the boxes down gently in the front hallway, the scent of lavender from the candle on the table greeting me like an old friend. This space didn't ask me to prove anything. It didn't measure my worth and usefulness. It just opened its arms. And for the first time, I let go. Of the weight. Of the waiting. Of the hope that they'd call, change, apologize. Letting go wasn't the ending. It was the key, not the deed. Not the plan. The key was the decision to stop loving people who needed me quiet and start living somewhere I could speak freely. Even if only to myself. Now the sky paints itself slowly, lavender and peach turning navy at the edges. The last. Light always feels the sweetest. I sit here with a blanket across my lap and a mug in my hand, steam curling like a soft thought I forgot I had. Some nights I wonder what could have been, but then I sip my tea and let it pass. Because what is enough. Twilight presses gently against the windows. The piano music next door fades to something softer, slower. The curtain flutters once, like it's breathing with me. This life I've built in the quiet isn't loud, but it's mine. And that, at the end of all things, is more than enough.